Hey everyone, and welcome back to Thesaurus Thrive. Have you ever felt like you're constantly learning new English words, but then poof, they just disappear from your memory the next day? Or maybe you know a word, but you're not quite sure how to use it naturally in a sentence? If that sounds familiar, then you are in the perfect place today.
Absolutely, Lily. It's such a common struggle for English learners, and honestly, it can feel really frustrating. You put in the effort, you look up definitions, maybe you even write down the words, but when it's time to speak, they just don't come to mind. It's like your brain has a filter that only lets some words through.
Exactly. And that's why today, Ava and I are super excited to dive into a method that has helped countless learners, including ourselves, not just learn words, but truly master them and use them confidently. We're talking about improving your vocabulary with stories.
Yes, stories. It might sound simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Today we're going to explore why stories are such a game changer for vocabulary acquisition, give you a clear step-by-step guide on how to use them effectively, and of course we'll have some practice opportunities and practical tips to help you apply everything you learn right away. Our goal is to make learning feel natural, engaging, and most importantly, effective for your spoken English.
So let's kick things off with the why. Why are stories so good for learning vocabulary? Ava, what's your take on it? Why do stories make words stick better than, say, just a flashcard?
That's a fantastic question, Lily. The main reason I believe is that our brains are naturally wired for stories. Think about it. Since we were kids, we've learned through narratives. Our ancestors passed down knowledge through stories. Our brains process information much better when it's part of a connected experience, not just a standalone fact. When you learn a word in a story, it comes with context, emotion, and a sequence of events. It's not just frantic feeling or showing a great deal of anxiety and disorder. It's, the little boy was frantic when he realized he couldn't find his mom in the crowded supermarket. See the difference?
Oh, that's such a great point. The example of frantic really highlights it. When I hear frantic in the context of a lost child in a supermarket, I don't just get the definition. I feel the emotion, I picture the scene. It gives the word depth and a much stronger hook in my memory. It's not just a word, it's an experience.
Exactly, and this context helps you understand the nuances of the word. You learn when and how to use it. If you just learn frantic from a dictionary, you might use it in a situation where busy or stressed would be more appropriate, but the story shows you its true colors, its intensity. It teaches you the feeling behind the word.
Right, the feeling. And also, I think stories naturally involve repetition without making it boring. If a character in a story is, say, determined, the story might show their determination in different situations. They might face challenges, but they're always determined to reach their goal. This natural repetition helps cement the word in your mind without feeling like you're drilling it.
Absolutely. It's not rote memorization, it's organic reinforcement. And when you learn words this way, you're also absorbing natural sentence structures and common collocations, words that often go together. For example, deeply moved, bitterly disappointed, or highly effective. These phrases become part of your understanding without you even trying to memorize them separately. They just feel right because you heard them in a meaningful context.
That's a huge benefit, especially for fluency. So many learners struggle with making their English sound natural, and learning words in context helps with that immensely. It's not just about knowing the meaning, it's about knowing how to use the word like a native speaker would. So, to sum up the why, stories provide context, emotion, natural repetition, and help you understand how words connect with other words in real sentences. It's a holistic approach.
Perfect summary, Lily. Now let's move on to the how. How can our listeners start using stories effectively to build their vocabulary? We've broken it down into a few simple steps. The first step is perhaps the most important. Choose a story that genuinely interests you.
Yes, interest is key. Don't pick something you find boring just because you think it's good for learning. If you love cooking, read recipes or short articles about food. If you're into sci-fi, find short sci-fi stories. It could be anything: a children's storybook, a short blog post, a newspaper article, or even a personal anecdote from a friend. The important thing is that it holds your attention. What kind of stories do you usually recommend, Ava?
Well, for beginners, I often suggest classic children's stories or fables. They usually have simple language, clear plots, and strong moral lessons, which makes them very memorable. Stories like The Tortoise and the Hare, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, or Little Red Riding Hood. These are fantastic because they're short, engaging, and often introduce foundational vocabulary in a memorable way. For intermediate learners, short stories by authors like O. Henry, or even short news articles about topics you care about, are excellent. The key is to find something that isn't too long or too complex for your current level. You don't want to feel overwhelmed.
That's such a great point about not getting overwhelmed. Start small and build up. Once you've chosen your story, the next step is to identify new words. And here's a crucial tip. Don't try to learn every single new word you see. That's a recipe for burnout. Instead, pick just a few words, maybe 3 to 5, that seem important to the story or catch your eye.
Exactly. Focus on quality, not quantity. If you're reading The Tortoise and the Hare, you might pick words like bragging, determined, overconfident, or perseverance. These words are central to the story's meaning. Don't worry about every little adverb or adjective you don't know. Choose words that make you think, "Oh, that sounds useful," or "I need to know this to fully understand the message."
Right. Once you've picked your 3 to 5 words, step 3 is all about understanding these words in context. This is where the magic really happens. Before you rush to your dictionary, try to guess the meaning of the word from the surrounding sentences. What's happening in the story? What emotions are being expressed? This helps you develop a really important skill, inferring meaning, which is something native speakers do all the time.
Yes, guessing first is vital. It makes you an active learner. After you've made an educated guess, then you can check a dictionary. But here's another tip. Use an English dictionary designed for learners. These dictionaries often provide simpler definitions and examples of how the word is used in sentences, which is much more helpful than just a translation.
Totally agree. An English dictionary reinforces your English thinking. So you've chosen your story, picked a few words, and understood them in context. Now for step 4, which is active creation. Create your own mini story or sentences using these new words. This is where you start to make the words truly yours.
Yes, this is where you move from passive understanding to active production. For instance, if one of your words was determined, from The Tortoise and the Hare, don't just write down the definition. Write a sentence about your life. Maybe, "I am determined to practice English for 30 minutes every day," or, "Despite the rain, she was determined to go for her morning run." Connect it to something personal and real for you. The more personal the connection, the stronger the memory.
That's fantastic advice. The more personal, the better. And you can even try to make a tiny story with 2 or 3 of your new words. For example, if you learned frantic and relief, you could say, "I was frantic when I couldn't find my passport, but then I felt immense relief when I finally found it under the sofa." That immediately links the words and makes them feel more natural to use together.
Absolutely. Building those connections is key. And that leads us perfectly into step 5. Retell the story using your new words. This is a game changer for speaking practice. You don't just read the story, you become the storyteller. You can retell it to yourself, to a friend, or even record yourself speaking.
Oh, this is my favorite part. So you've read The Tortoise and the Hare. Now, without looking at the book, try to tell the story in your own words, making sure to include bragging, determined, and perseverance. You might start with, "There was once an overconfident hare who was always bragging about how fast he was." And then you continue, making sure to weave in those words naturally.
And don't worry if it's not perfect. The goal isn't perfection, it's practice and active recall. You can even try retelling the story from a different character's perspective. For instance, how would the tortoise describe the race? He might talk about his steadfast approach or his unwavering determination. This really pushes you to think creatively and use the words in different grammatical structures.
That's a brilliant variation. Retelling from another perspective truly challenges you and deepens your understanding. It's not just repeating, it's transforming the information, which is a higher level of learning. And finally, step 6, and this is crucial for long-term retention. Review and revisit regularly. Learning a word once isn't enough. You need to see it, hear it, and use it multiple times over time.
Definitely. Think of it like planting a seed. You plant it once, but then you need to water it regularly for it to grow. For vocabulary, this means coming back to your stories and new words. maybe you reread the story a week later, or you try to retell it again. You can create flashcards for your new words, but remember to include a sentence from the story or your own personal sentence on the card, not just the definition. Spaced repetition systems are also excellent for this.
Yes, consistency is key here. Even 5 minutes of review a day is more effective than one long session once a month. The more you encounter and actively use a word, the more likely it is to become a permanent part of your active vocabulary, meaning you can use it effortlessly in conversation. So, to quickly recap the how, choose an interesting story, identify a few key new words, understand them in context, create your own sentences, retell the story using those words, and then review them regularly. It's a complete cycle for powerful learning.
Beautifully put, Lily. Now, before we jump into some quick practice, I want to talk about some useful vocabulary and phrases that you might come across when you're discussing stories or your learning process. These can really help you articulate your thoughts better.
Oh, that's a great idea, Ava. For example, when you're talking about a story, you might say, "The plot was really engaging," or "The main character was so relatable." Plot means the sequence of events, and character is a person in the story. Simple but fundamental.
Right, and if you're talking about a word, you might say, "I came across a new word," which means you found it, or "I need to grasp the meaning of this sentence," meaning to understand it completely. You could also say, "The story really captivated me," meaning it held your attention completely. Or, "This word really resonates with me," meaning you feel a strong connection to it.
Those are excellent. And when you're talking about the learning process, you might say, "I'm trying to reinforce my vocabulary," meaning to make it stronger, or "I need to revisit this topic," meaning to look at it again. You can also say, "I'm trying to immerse myself in English," which means surrounding yourself with the language.
Exactly. So try to listen for these words and use them when you're talking about your own learning journey. It makes your English sound much more natural and sophisticated.
All right, are you ready for a little practice, our dear listeners?
We're going to say a few sentences, and we want you to repeat them aloud, focusing on clear pronunciation and trying to remember the context.
Get ready to speak. Here's the first one. The curious child asked many questions about the world. Now you try. The curious child asked many questions about the world.
Great. Next, he was determined to achieve his dream of becoming a writer. Your turn. He was determined to achieve his dream of becoming a writer.
Fantastic. How about this? The plot of the movie was incredibly engaging and kept me on the edge of my seat.
Repeat after me.
The plot of the movie was incredibly engaging and kept me on the edge of my seat.
Good job. One more. Learning new words in context truly reinforces my understanding. Now you. Learning new words in context truly reinforces my understanding.
Wonderful. We hope you were speaking along with us. Remember, speaking aloud, even if it's just repeating, makes a huge difference. Now, let's hear how using stories might sound in a mini conversation. Ava, you start us off.
Okay, Lily. So, I was reading this fascinating article about ancient discoveries yesterday, and I came across this incredible word, unearthing. I'd heard it before, but in this story, it was about archaeologists unearthing an ancient city. It really clicked for me.
Oh, unearthing. That's a great one. So, from the context, what did you guess it meant before you looked it up?
Well, the article described them carefully digging and revealing things that were buried for a long time, so I thought it meant something like digging up or revealing from the ground. And I was pretty close. The dictionary confirmed it meant to dig up from the earth or to discover something hidden. It made so much sense within the story.
That's brilliant. And did you try to create your own sentence with unearthing?
I did. I thought about it and wrote, "My sister and I spent the afternoon unearthing old photos and letters in our grandmother's attic. It felt good to connect it to my own experience, not just the archaeologists."
That's a perfect example of how to make a word stick. You guessed the meaning, checked it, and then personalized it. And now you can probably retell that article, or at least the part with unearthing, with ease, right?
Exactly, and it feels so much more natural now. It's definitely cemented in my memory. See, listeners, that's how the process works in real life. It's not just about reading. It's about interacting with the words and making them part of your own mental landscape.
That was a fantastic example, Ava. It really shows how these steps connect. Now, we want to leave you with a few motivating tips to keep you going on your English fluency journey. Because learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint, and sometimes we all need a little boost.
Our first tip is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. This is huge. Every single person, even native speakers, makes mistakes. Learning a new language involves making errors. It's how your brain tests boundaries and learns what works and what doesn't. Think of mistakes as stepping stones, not roadblocks. If you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing yourself enough. Embrace them, learn from them, and move on.
That's so true, Ava. Perfectionism can be the biggest enemy of progress. Just open your mouth and speak. Our second tip is consistency over intensity. It's much better to study for 10 to 15 minutes every single day than to have one big, intense 2-hour study session once a week. Daily exposure and practice, even for a short time, builds momentum and helps your brain retain information much more effectively. It creates a habit, and habits are powerful.
Absolutely. Small, regular efforts compound over time. You'll see much better results. And our third tip, which we often emphasize, is enjoy the process. If learning feels like a chore, you're less likely to stick with it. Find ways to make English fun for you. Watch movies you love with English subtitles. Listen to music, play games, or read stories as we discussed today, about topics you're genuinely interested in. When you enjoy it, it doesn't feel like work, and you'll naturally spend more time with the language.
Yes, enjoyment is the fuel for long-term learning. So, to wrap things up today, remember that learning vocabulary with stories is a powerful, natural, and engaging way to boost your English. It helps words stick because it provides context, emotion, and natural repetition. Follow our 6 steps. Choose an interesting story, identify a few new words, understand them in context, create your own sentences, retell the story, and review regularly. And always, always remember our tips. Don't fear mistakes. Be consistent, and make learning enjoyable.
We truly believe this method will transform how you learn and use English vocabulary. If you found this episode helpful and you're ready to start your story-driven vocabulary journey, please give this podcast a like, share it with anyone who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe to Thesaurus Thrive for more practical English learning tips and strategies.
Yes, subscribe. We love having you as part of our community. Keep practicing, keep telling your stories, and keep thriving in English. We're here to support you every step of the way. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Until next time, happy learning, everyone. Take care and speak English confidently.